When did radon first kind of become a thing? Like, when did we figure out that, we were having a radon problem and there needed to be steps taken in order to sort of mitigate those issues?
Well, it's interesting because there is a story that occurred in 1984 with a person named Stanley Watrous. He was a nuclear engineer that was working at a nuclear power plant in Limerick, Pennsylvania, and he was moved there with his family to help open the nuclear power plant. And they installed radiation detectors at the plant so that when people left the plant at the end of the day to make sure they weren't carrying radiation home on their clothes. And even before the plant had been fully operable, Stanley set off the radiation detector on his way into work, which means he was bringing radiation into the plant, which puzzled them. And they basically figured out that it was on his clothes. And he tied it back to his house, tested his house, and found that his home was extremely high for radon. That's what they found was the culprit of the radiation on his clothes. The the actionable limit for radon is 4.0 picocuries per liter. His home had 2,700 picocuries per liter. And so the EPA moved them out of their house and studied the whole neighborhood and mitigated the home for radon. And then they actually moved back into the home. And as of about 10 years ago, they were still living in the home and they had not, none of the family had lung cancer. So the mitigation system did work. But that started bringing attention to radon in homes. And that's kind of that. And then in the late 80s, following that, the Surgeon General put out a warning that radon is a serious health concern for Americans. And that's kind of what started our industry or our concern about radon and lung cancer.
Is it pretty standard for radon to be tested for just everywhere, or are there some places that, if you don't ask for it, we don't test for it?
Usually in structure, I mean, anything that's being put up. So like, your school buildings, your homes, um, we see, obviously we have other avenues as well as in like the mines and things like that. Like Zan was referring to nuclear plants, things like that. For commercial structures, I'm sure that's probably, if they want it. But anything I think residential for sure has to be.